Welcome to UX Research Geeks, where we geek out with researchers from all around the world on topics they are passionate about. I'm your host, Tina Vitkova, a researcher and a strategist, and this podcast is brought to you by UX Tweak, an all-in-one UX research tool. This is the episode 54 of UXR Geeks, and we're thrilled to feature the inspiring Tejiri, a designer from Nigeria with a passion for empowering others. Tejiri's journey into UX design starts in computer engineering, a love for graphical design, and a pivotal moment during a global hackathon. This episode was recorded fittingly on International Women's Day, and together we'll delve into the experiences of her as a female designer in Nigeria and challenges she faced and the power of mentorship and the community. She also shares her insight on how diverse perspective, especially from women, enrich design and business. Tune in. As every time, before we dive into the topic, I would like to ask you to a little bit introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you doing? Tell us everything you want to.
All right. Thank you so much. And it's so good to be on this episode. So my name is Oghenetejiri Agbodoroba. And most people call me Tejiri or TJ for short, because usually it's difficult for them to pronounce the entire name. So I grew up in Warri Delta State, which is in the south of Nigeria. And I have my background in computer engineering, but for the last 3 years, I've been a user experience designer. And so currently I work with Kimoyo.co, where I lead the design and delivery of software solutions. And Kimoyo.co is more like a research tool. It's automating user research and market research across Africa. And in addition to that, I also co-lead one of the Google Developers Community Program, where I'm helping over 600 people break into tech. So that's a summary.
Nice. So if anybody wants to have you as a mentor, they can approach you through this program. Do I understand it right?
Yes, of course they can.
Great. So please do it. I hope you are not overwhelmed after this episode. I'm interested in this switch of yours because it's not super common, but it's common that people from IT switch to design.
Mm.
Where does it come for you, this decision?
I think for me, it was because I was majorly in love with graphics. I have very huge passion for creativity. And I actually first started as a graphic designer, from graphic design into user interface design, then into user experience design. So it wasn't like an immediate switch. And this switch happened, that was during COVID-19. Yes, when the COVID-19 struck, and there was an hackathon, a global hackathon, that was calling out for innovators to come create solutions that could help tackle the COVID as at the time. So with my graphic skills and also learning user experience design, I jumped on it. I joined a team that was called Team FACO, and we created a contactless solution that could offer diagnostic tests to consumers and healthcare providers. And to our surprise, we ended up winning first place for COVID-19 hackathon. And after that experience, I was like, wow. I was like, okay, I think design is a little more than just graphics. It can actually solve solutions. And I became more curious and I wanted to learn more. So that was when I made the switch. I started taking courses. I started attending events. Then here we are today.
Nice. And this leads me to the topic that we said we are going to talk about today, because we decided to talk about female and women designers in Nigeria. And we are also doing this recording on an International Women's Day, which we didn't plan to, but it's really well. So maybe from the perspective of a woman, of a young woman trying to enter the business, how was it for you?
Okay, so entering into it wasn't so easy. But I think what made it easy was the fact that I had mentors and I had role models I could look up to. And I think that's something we also need more of in the tech industry, in the design industry, and also in the engineering industry. Because when you are able to see people that sound like you and look like you, it's easier for you to believe that you could one day get into that position. So I had people that they started off here. I saw them grow in their career. And an example I can give to you now is Michelle Shimbudu. She's currently one of the lead product designers at Ledger, which is like a digital asset platform. And another person I would mention is Bonale Banwo. She is the co-founder, no, sorry, not the co-founder. She's the founder of Genesis School of Design and also the founder of Azari Tech. These two women, I practically looked at their journey. They started from here and they moved into the international stage. And it was easy for me to relate to their story because I was like, okay, my location is not really an hindrance. What I need to do is I need to put in the work. If I have access to the right opportunities, the right resources, then also I too can play on the international stage. And so that was how it basically was for me.
That is a really important point. I was discussing it with a colleague of mine. He just, as a Eastern
Mhm.
European, didn't understand why Netflix is casting so many LGBTQI plus people, so many people of color. And I was like, society is like that. And also you have things from other countries, but to see that somebody like you is actually making it, although it's
Mhm.
probably harder and you have to do more, is important. Because I remember seeing I think she was from Slovakia or Czech Republic, entrepreneur being really high up in some company. And I was like, wow, okay, so even Eastern European girls, so it's not just making fun of Netflix in Netflix series about big hair and blue makeup or whatever, but we can do shit.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, exactly. Because once you are able to see these people, it's more like a beacon of light that this is possible as well for me. So it's an encouragement for girls who also want to follow that career path too.
mhm. Going back to you, those are the mentors or the people that you were
Mm.
looking to. How did it start for you? What were the steps leading to be a designer that you are right now?
Interesting. Okay. It's a very interesting story because currently now I'm one of the co-leads of the Google Developers Group in my community. And 4 years ago, when I was actually looking into how to transition into tech, I was looking at communities that were within my region. And that was when I came across the community here in Warri, and it was being headed by Charles Freeborn. So I reached out to Charles Freeborn on Twitter. I sent him a DM. That stuff whereby people like they'll tell you that people hardly respond to their DMs, expect a response in like a month. But to my surprise, he responded same day. I
Mhm.
sent the DM in the morning, same day towards the evening. He had already sent a message and told me that okay, he's going to have a discussion with me so he can probably understand what I wanted. So we had the conversation, and he told me he's currently the lead for GDG, and he would want to add me to the platform. That once I get into the platform, I would be able to have access to resources because they always organize workshops, meetups. At first, I was hesitant because it was more of a developer community, but it was not until I joined the community I saw it was a people that had diverse skills from product management to design to QA testing. So we had different people in the community. And so that was the beginning for me, just basically attending meetups, seeing what people were doing. So I was more like building on my curiosity. And it was even in the community after I joined the community, that was when the Global Hackathon Slack channel was shared. So imagine I wasn't in the community, I wouldn't even have known that there was an opportunity like that. And so that was the journey for me. And I think another thing that totally helped me to come out of my shadows was the fact that the developers festival that was held that year, because they had more male speakers coming in, they needed more female to come in. And so they asked me if I could be one of the speakers. I was like, what am I going to speak about? I'm just a graphic designer. And it was like, speak about your experience, speak about your designs, the people you've worked with. And that was how it started. After that experience, I got introduced to other people. So it was more like being in the community. I had access to other communities because people were always sharing resources that was from other communities. So I just started building on from there, from mentorship. I went into Kimoyo Fellowship. That was where I got to learn about research, user experience design, and it just kept going, honestly speaking.
Nice, nice. But it points out two things: the importance of a community, because the
Hmm.
people who are meeting, then you become more easily the person that you want to become. And the second
Hmm.
is what I love, that you were actually bold and sending out a message to a stranger, because that's what internet is for. And that's no, I think many, especially young females who I'm mentoring, they're like, oh, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? I don't want to be annoying. No, girl, you are not annoying. It's just what you want. So, yeah,
Yes.
great. I know it's a little bit strange question in a way that
Mm.
I don't want to divide qualities of men and women. But what would you say are the strengths and the different perspectives that women are bringing to design and maybe even into the Nigerian business?
I think women are bringing a lot of strengths into design. And the first thing that comes to mind is the diverse thinking. Naturally, men and women think differently. Men are logical, and women are really analytical. They tend to analyze the details to the minimum. And analysis is something that is very important when it comes to design. And speaking from the standpoint of being a user experience designer, if you are able to understand what your users require, it's easy for you to be able to create the solutions that they need to solve that your problem. So that diverse thinking is really important, because when you are able to have that balanced perspective, having the perspective from the male gender, the female gender, you are able to achieve a universal design. That's the first thing. And I think the next thing will have to be storytelling. Women are natural born storytellers. I still remember one day I was going through Twitter and someone was like, if you ask a man how his day went, he's going to only respond to you with one word. Either it tells you my day was okay or it was good. But you ask a woman, she's going to give you like a 30-minute script, how she left the house, who she met, the colleague that annoyed her, every single thing that happened the entire day. And that is one perspective that women bring into design, because design is all about storytelling. You have to be able to communicate the rationale behind the design you're making. You have to be able to communicate that experience. And I think those two things, women bring them into design. And what else comes to mind? Okay, yes, I would say attention to details as well too. Another thing women bring into design as well.
That's interesting that you are mentioning the attention to detail, because I would say some yes, some not. But the storytelling never came to me because, yes, women tend to speak more because we were socialized to be more communicative. We ask more
Yeah.
questions, three times more as
Yeah.
questions according to studies. So it's not even a stereotype. It's really true how we behave while we are socialized. And it never came to my mind like, yes, this is how we can bring a story into design. Interesting. Very nice. Thank you for that. And what is the situation now in Nigeria when it comes to female designers? I know it's a really broad question, but how would you describe it
Mm,
with your own words? We are not going to fact check it, but maybe your perception of the business and women in it.
okay. For female in design, there was a data I came across, and I believe it might have changed or it might have gotten worse after the pandemic. And what it stated was that the probability of finding a female designer in a firm in Nigeria is 20%. And
Hmm.
that is just for design, let alone for leadership. So it's like the statistics is really low. But we still have a lot of women that are leading in design, like I mentioned earlier, the two women I mentioned earlier, that are still leading in design, leading decision making, also having to provide the opportunity for people to believe that they also have the opportunity to succeed in the environment of design.
20%, yeah. I think numbers would be probably the same where I come from, or even in the German speaking countries, especially leadership. But when it comes to the leadership, you were mentioning it now,
Mm.
or do you have any perception on how many women and yeah, how many women are in leadership positions?
In Nigeria, I'm not sure of how many women are in leadership position, but I think I came across a data by Adeva Reports. And that was just for the Western region. And according to the
Mhm.
data, they said it's based on international standard. And they said we have only 5% of women that are in leadership position in tech.
Oh, wow.
5% of women who start up in tech as well. Then when it comes to Fortune 500 companies, women who are executives are just 11%.
Hmm.
So that's just for, yeah, the Western world. But for Nigeria, I don't have that data for Nigeria.
Yeah, but it's also interesting, at least for the western part. I get it, because getting these type of statistic is somehow really hard. Why would you say is it that there's not so much women in design and not so much women in design leadership?
I would say why we do not have so much women in design leadership is because one, there's also like the shortage of role models. And what I mean by that is that, like I said initially, when you are able to see people that have gone ahead and doing the things you want to do, it encourages more girls to pursue careers that are in STEM, careers that are in design, or careers that are in technology. And also another thing that I would say is like the society expectations. There is this belief that the primary role of a woman is confined to her home. And that belief system has hindered progress for a long while, because why? Women bring diverse skills, and we need to recognize and we need to appreciate those skills and those talents they bring to the table. Because women are very articulate in what they do. I think it was one report that I was reading as well too. It was talking about some companies, I think Fortune 500 companies that had women in their executive positions. And it talked about how they had increase in revenues, turning over 60 something percentage. And if you see those kind of data, it tells you that women have the skills that are needed to lead business and lead decisions making. So, like I said, society expectations, lack of role models, those are two things I feel
Mhm.
hindering this women. Yeah.
It amazes me that we have to still discuss this and defend that women are great at their jobs. I don't know if I want to cry from it or I want to be angry or anything. We have to come up with this data. Even the fact that we have to come up with the data, oh, we can earn money and good money is, but I love it that you have to prove. Yeah. And a little bit more of a personal question, because especially when I started in advertising and then I went to UX.
Mhm.
UX was very much for me a very welcoming place. It was a little bit harder when I was in management positions where I was talking to people higher up in hierarchies of the companies, and those were most of the time men. I didn't have any really bad experiences, but when I was younger, it was harder, and there was quite a lot of sexism on different levels and a lot of looking up over me. And sometimes
Mm.
even it happens that I go for a date and a guy learns that I am in UX and they start to lecture me on what is UX, where I'm like 10 years in this business. How was it for you personally? What were you fighting for and against?
I think one thing I was always fighting for was proving that I could do what I could do. You always had your skills questioned. And I had an experience quite recently. I had a meeting with a client because I had not met the client before. So we're supposed to have that initial intro call, talk about and the product and everything. The moment I got into the call, I knew from that moment that we were not going to have a second call because of the responses and how the conversation was going. And so immediately he told me that he was going to give me a call. I knew the call was not going to come in. And believe you, till now, I haven't heard from that client. And so you always have like your skills questioned if you would be able to deliver. But it's not about how I look, it's about what I can deliver to you. And that's like the most important thing. I think that's one thing I've experienced. And another experience I had as well too, I was working with two other guys on a product, and I was the only female designer on the team. And so we usually had things whereby we would discuss what we're working on. And I discovered that for every time that we had a sync, it was like they had a conversation prior, and moving into that conversation, it felt like it was a continuous conversation from what they had. So I was like, what exactly is going on? So I always felt by the side. And that's where mentorship is very important. I was very fortunate to have a mentor. And I reached out to my mentor because I have both male and female mentors because I enjoy their different perspective based on the work that they do. And he
Mm.
told me that if I want to solve this, I should ensure that I speak up during the meeting. No matter what they say, I should ensure my voice is heard. And at the end of every meeting, I should let them know that, okay, what are we working on till we meet next? Let's assign the tasks that everyone will be working on. So when we meet during the next time, everyone is going to do a presentation of what they worked on and we are going to give feedback. And that was what solved it for me. The next meeting, I implemented the advice he gave me, and that was how we started working going forward. And honestly, I can tell you the truth, from the very first experience, it wasn't nice. You would go back questioning if you're good at what you do, and that's not a good feeling at all.
It's not. I imagine people who are more introverted or people who just didn't have a possibility to be bold because they didn't have, for example, siblings to fight with. That's training. We women, it's this paradox of we have to be bold, we have to speak up for ourselves, we have to
Mm-hmm.
defend ourselves still. And when we do it, we are then even sometimes called bad names, or, oh, you are too much, or you are too annoying, or you are too hard, or whatever. So it's actually the feedback when you do it and sustaining it can be
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Yeah, it can be hard, and you have to do it in such a way where you don't come off as being rude, because then people would take you that, oh, you're someone who's unapproachable. So you have to be careful about that as well.
Yeah, but it's still when a lady or a woman, female is rude or angry, it's always, I had a fight with a friend of mine where he goes, "Oh, you're aggressive." Well, no, I'm not aggressive. I'm angry. And that's the difference. And I'm showing you.
Then I
So
am angry.
you were mentioning more times the mentors and the communities. And if you were to give an advice on, or maybe insight on these communities to younger people or even people who want to get into the business no matter the age, what would you tell? How can these communities and these mentors help you?
Okay, so for these communities and these mentors, they can help you with training. They can help you have access to resources. And also, they also serve as support networks. And one example that I can give is like the Women Tech Makers program. And like I told you earlier, one thing I've discovered is if you are in one community, there's a probability that someone who is in that community belongs to 7 or 10 other communities. And every information they would be getting from that community will be passed on into that community. And that was how it started for me. I was just in the GDG and WTM community here in Warri. And from that community, I was having resources to other communities like Shikode Africa, Ingressive for Gold, because they were constantly sharing the opportunities, sharing the resources that were in that communities. Because they were offering trainings, there were communities that were offering as much as giving laptops to people who would want to learn how to program. They were offering data stipends. They were even offering as much as they would pay for a course you want to take. So all of these opportunities are available. So you just need to join one community. And I can say for starters, you can join the Women Tech Makers because that is one community that you have anywhere around the globe. Wherever you are located, there's a Women Tech Makers community. If you can join that, you would have access to other communities because the resources goes around like a 360 degree.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Great, great advice. And talking about advices, this is probably one of my last questions, but as we have the Women International Day, I want to ask you, what would you advise Nigerian men professionals how to deal with women?
I think the one word I would just say is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one word I would say, empathy. They should be more empathetic. We have a lot of men that are already doing that. I think recently there were a lot of men that sponsored a few ladies in design during this International Women's Day. There's a design school called Pessels that is currently in Lagos. So what they did, they were like sponsoring 15 ladies into design. So they were
Mm.
long ladies Yeah, there were a long list. There were women that were sponsoring, but we also had men that were sponsoring. So you could see that they were putting themselves in these ladies' shoes, understanding the points, understanding this is what they need for them to be on the global stage as well. They need these trainings, they need the technical know-how, they need access to these opportunities, and it's only come if they know how to do the required skills. And so they should just be more empathetic. Empathy is the key word. That's what I would say.
I hope that a lot of men are really trying and doing the work. I'm seeing it as well, and I hope more and more will come. Last question. Where can people follow you and where can they contact you?
Okay, so people can follow me on LinkedIn.
Great. So thank you very much for your wisdom. Thank you very much for doing the work in looking into the data and telling us your story. I really appreciate it and have a beautiful International Women's Day.
Thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you for listening to UXR Geeks. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. Your support is really what keeps us going. If you have any tips on fantastic speakers from across the globe, feedback or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to UXR Geeks podcast at uxtweak.com. Special thanks goes to our podcast producer, Jana Filoshova, our social media specialist, Daria Krasovskaya, and our audio specialist, Melissa Danishova. And to all of you, thank you for tuning in.